Welcome, everybody. I'm James Shore, and this is the Art of Agile Development Book Club. Today, we are discussing chartering, and I'm very happy to have Diana Larsen joining us. Once again, Diana, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Diana is the co-author of Liftoff, Start and Sustain Successful Agile Teams. It is the definitive book on Agile chartering, and it is in its second edition. It is also the basis for the material in my book. So, Diana, I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thanks. Yeah.
Those of you who have been attending for a while know that I typically start these sessions by reading an excerpt from my book. But in this case, I think it's actually more appropriate that we read an excerpt from Diana's book. And Diana has graciously agreed to do the reading herself. So Diana, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Oop, there we go. For ages, humans have watched birds soaring and have wanted to fly. We stayed earthbound until we learned about the effects of gravity and how to overcome them. Now we can defy gravity with a rocket launch or liftoff. Rockets generate energy at the start of a flight, giving humans the force to overcome gravitational pull and boost themselves skyward. At the beginning of a team-based effort, often there's a void, an inertia. Teams need an initial boost, a liftoff, to generate a force that overrides the inertia resulting from a lack of common purpose, unclear communication channels, undefined working relationships, and other areas of ambiguity. To add to the confusion, every project and product has many parts. A visionary with a big idea, people who are directly and indirectly involved in the work, a particular physical or virtual space and psychological climate, process tools and techniques, and more. The first time all of these parts come together sets the tone for the work and lays the foundation for everything to come out later.
Thank you very much, Diana.
Sure.
So that is the topic for today. It is chartering. Specifically in my book, it is purpose, context, and alignment, which are also the major chapters of Diana's book, which she co-authored. I should mention that she co-authored it with Ainsley Nies. My book is available for purchase. You can get it now on Amazon. If you go to jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2, you'll see it, or you can go to jamesshore.com/s/buy-AOAD2. And Diana's book is available from the Pragmatic Programmers and on Amazon and everywhere else books are sold, I believe. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Our first discussion prompt: what aspects of chartering are particularly important to you or your teams? Diana, you literally wrote the book on this, and I may be asking you to choose your favorite baby, but yeah. What aspects of chartering, if you had to choose just a few, which ones would you focus on first?
I think the first part I would focus on is the vision, is the why are we here? Why are we working here together? I mean, that is so incredibly essential that people know what the journey is that they're been invited on, right, and where they're headed, what it is they're trying to create for the world or some part of the world. But the other part that I think I would encourage people to pay attention to is the whole arena around context. I think the other parts of what we call purpose, mission tests, and alignment, working agreements, doing some team building with the core team, those are things people are more likely to do. Maybe not all at once, but over time with their teams, they're more likely to do those things. The thing that Ainsley and I discovered was often missing was helping the team to understand its context. Where were its relationships? How was it supposed to interact with the rest of the organization? Who did it depend on? Who depended on their work? All those kinds of things about understanding the context that the team is in, I think, are really important and are often not included when people are chartering a team or just helping a team get started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly my experience as well. I'm actually a little surprised to hear you say that because I know you love the alignment material.
Oh, absolutely.
But I would agree that if I had to choose something that people don't do or they underestimate the value of, it would be the context piece. Because the ideas in the alignment, the ideas in purpose, I had seen those prior to reading your book, but the ideas in context, I would say that was probably the most unique. So what about all of you? What are your experiences with chartering? Or if you haven't had experience with the chartering, what are some pieces that that you would like to start to introduce? Coming back to this idea of context, I have been working with a company. I've mentioned this in previous sessions. I've been working at a company, and we haven't done the full chartering yet. But what we did do is we did purpose and context as sort of how are we going to get the planning started. And one thing that really stood out to me was how much surprise there was around the context and how much value it brought to the folks.
Saw Harold put his hand up.
Oh, I didn't see that. Thank you.
Yeah.
It looks like he may have put it down again. Harold, welcome. I hope you had your hand up because you wanted to say something. So if you did, please join us.
I just love this material. I've loved watching it be born from the work of Ainsley and Three at an Agile Open where there's a large crowd listening to Three, who's sadly passed away. But for me, the purpose and the vision thing is definitely number one. And my big question around that is around I've done some team training on team coaching, and experts in the field gave me something that I was surprised that I didn't know, but seems so true, is that purpose creates the team. The team doesn't create the purpose. And sadly, not every group or working team qualifies as a team, according to the experts. And so a lot of them don't really have a clue. So I'm wondering, as an Agile coach working with these kind of sort of not really exactly teams, trying to do Scrum or whatever, a lot of them really need to do rechartering. That's my big question. That seems to be the hard thing.
Yeah. It's the adoption question seems to come up every time, doesn't it? No matter the topic. What are your thoughts on that, Diana?
Well, I think Harold's right on. Well, for one thing, we actually devote some time in our book about doing restarts. That sometimes the team misses that opportunity right at the beginning to get together and sort of hash out those understandings, and they have to do it. They find themselves needing to do it later on. So that's absolutely true. But also the idea that purpose creates the team, not the other way around. That's so absolutely right on. It's in chaos theory or complexity theory. It's like purpose is the point attractor. It's the thing that draws us all together, right? It's what creates us as a system that is getting ready to accomplish something. And I think that's just so super important to notice that. And that's why I always work with the leaders in the organization, product sponsors, product development managers, product owners, those folks ahead of time to help them get clear about what their product vision is or their service vision is before we take that to the team, and sometimes even before we figure out who's on the team. Mm-hmm. And I know it's incredibly important when people are doing team self-selection to have that clarified so that people can be drawn to the purpose and vision that they want to contribute to. It just, that's free energy, right? By doing it that way, you're getting free energy, free discretion of showing up and working on this thing every day by allowing people to be drawn to the purpose. So I think that's so true, Harold. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is a good segue into our next discussion prompt, which is about purpose. I would love to hear from all of you in the audience. I'd love to hear a story about how purpose or the lack of purpose on a team has made a difference to a team that you've worked with. A. Kesner in the Discord writes, and you can find the Discord at jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2 Discord. We have some great conversations there. A. Kesner writes, I'm currently on a team which has had its charter changed. After providing good value, there is now a goal for predictability. This has caused a conflict in our existing Agile practices, and I'd love to hear ideas about how a naturally chaotic process can become predictable. So rechartering and a major change in the purpose of the team, I think it could be energizing or maybe de-energizing for teams.
Yeah, I mean, we try to make the point very strongly that every edition of chartering that a team goes through is just another draft. And you don't really know the final draft until right before the team disbands, right? Or the product is sunsetted or whatever. But yeah, the need to come back and check in and say, what are we still on the track that we thought we were going to be on? Is this still the mission that is serving us? Those kinds of things, they need regular attention and refreshing to make sure they're still relevant to what's going on. And when a team is kind of struggling with what is our direction now, where are we going, is a great time, if you hadn't done that whole first draft before or subsequent ones, to get one in place. I think that's a really good time to do that.
I think chartering is one of those things that is really undervalued or underestimated in organizations. And I have, convinced people to do chartering mostly because I'm well enough known that people hire me to tell them what to do, right? So I say, do this, and they say, okay. But that rechartering part is something that I think is easily lost. So Diana, what do you do to help people understand the value of doing purpose, creating purpose in the first place, and then actually coming back to it in 6 months or whatever the appropriate time frame is to look at it again?
Yeah. Well, in some ways, in my world, purpose has three parts. It has the vision, the product vision what is it we're trying to manifest in the world? The team's mission, what's the work we're going to do to contribute to manifesting that? And then some, what we called mission tests, because we were kind of doing a play on things in Agile being test driven, but people call them key results. What they are is success indicators. How do we know that we're still on the right path?
Yeah, and we did it. I ended up calling them indicators in my edition.
You called them indicators in your book. So those are the thing in purpose. Vision tends to stay pretty stable, but environmental conditions can cause the team's mission to maybe change slightly, but usually not a lot. The indicators change much more frequently because they need to be more short-term check-ins. Are we still on course? Are we still moving towards success? And I would think that in the example of needing to have more predictability or those kinds of things that the Discord member wrote in, is like that would become a new, in my term, mission test, a new indicator. Are we able to work in a way that creates more predictability? Is that now, can we incorporate that as part of our mission? And as opposed to throwing out the whole purpose and starting over. Now, sometimes products are sunsetted. Sometimes we discover there's not a market that we thought there was going to be, or we just decide it's going to be too expensive to serve that market or whatever. And in that case, that team might just let that effort go and go on to a new product. But that's a whole new rechartering. And so it depends on what the extent of the difference is. Is this just something we need to incorporate more predictability in the way we work, or do we need a product where predictability is its essential, outstanding, distinguishing feature, and do we need to rethink what our product is altogether? Those are really two different ways of thinking about how your chartering needs to change.
Yeah. And I don't want this to turn into a conversation about forecasting and prediction.
Right. Yeah.
We're going to cover that later on down the road, but it is my experience that predictability is valued not so much because it improves the value of the product in the marketplace or the utility, the ability of the organization to meet its goals, but instead it serves sort of internal political goals, which are also valid. They are also valid, but maybe a little harder to convince, people on the team of their value of. Let's go ahead and move on to context. So this is, I think, one of the most interesting ideas, partly as you were mentioning, partly because it's so infrequently discovered on its own. So the discussion prompt I have for all of you, and again, I'd love to hear from those of you in the audience. Please just use Zoom to raise your hand. But the prompt I'm going to ask you all to respond to is, how have you seen teams surprised by their context? That is, their boundaries and interactions, the resources available to the team, and other things about how the team interacts with its organization. What happened and how did that work out? And while you're thinking about that, Diana, do you have any stories to share about teams being surprised by their context, or going through the context exercise with you and seeing some pleasant surprises come out of that?
Oh, well, yeah, stories, lots of stories. The one that's popping into my mind right now, though, is about the part of context, the third part of context that you didn't mention as much, which is the perspective analysis, or the looking ahead. Mm-hmm. Giving the team an opportunity to think in terms of risk analysis. What are the opportunities for us as a group working together? What are the threats that could inhibit us as a group working together? How can we have those in mind a bit, and have maybe some mitigation already planned, or some things that we can do if the threats come true, or some things that we could take advantage of if one of those opportunities came through for us. I think that teams are often surprised by that. That was, traditionally, that's always been the purview of only the project manager. That's mm-hmm. been their thing, is doing the risk analysis. But I think that's one thing, at least for the short term, the next 3 months or so, that is a thing the team can do for themselves, and they can pre-plan so that they're more resilient. They're not as knocked off by new things that might come in and change that might have been entirely predictable, or at least, there's this whole thing about, we can't say what's going to happen to us, but we can know that something will. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like, we don't know who on the team is going to get sick, or what they're going to get sick with during flu season, right? But we can probably predict that someone on the team will. There's a high probability of that. So what are we going to do when we lose that team member? And to have that already in place, so it's a smooth transition and they can relax, knowing that things are taken care of. They can relax, pay attention to their own self-care while they're gone. So it's those kinds of things that that teams are often surprised at, and surprised at the usefulness of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those of you who haven't seen Diana's book and have only looked at mine, this perspective analysis is actually in the visual planning portion of the book. Looks like Jay Bazuzzi wants to comment. Jay, welcome.
Hi, Diana.
Hey, good to see you.
I was just thinking about times when I have been surprised by context, and one came to mind. I was working on a team on a feature that our users were very eager to get their hands on, and I said, we could maybe ship this a little sooner if we trimmed some of the details away. We could shrink the feature a little bit, ship something that they would probably like a lot, and then hear what they complain about and do another iteration and make it better. And so we could learn more, but make a better feature, and we could deliver something of value sooner. Let's do that. And every time I'd say that, I wouldn't get any, it was like people would just be silent. There was no reaction. Nothing would happen. And I kept saying it over and over. And then finally, somebody took me aside and explained that whatever we ship the first time, that's all we're going to ship. This organization will never come back and ship a second iteration. We'll be pulled off to some other unrelated new feature. Sure enough, when we shipped the feature, that's exactly what happened. They were right. I didn't understand that about the context. And it was just whatever we put in the first feature release that the feature would become. So that was the context. I couldn't see it until somebody finally explained it to me.
That's a really great point, Jay. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Diana, did you want to say something?
No, just.
Okay. We had a little bit of mix up on my end where Diana got muted and then couldn't speak. I think that's a really interesting point, Jay, and I think it's one that I see quite frequently is, and it's sort of a self-perpetuating problem, right? People know that they're never going to get another bite at the apple, so they pile stuff in, which of course makes it even more difficult to have time to get another bite at the apple. It's one of those self-reinforcing loops that goes in a negative direction.
Well, and people get their workarounds, and then they become attached to their workarounds when they know that there's a pattern in their organization, and then they don't want to. Then they get comfortable with them. And
I think it was your co-author on Agile Retrospectives. Maybe I'm misremembering, but doesn't Esther Derby say we need to take the fun out of dysfunction?
Yes, yeah. There have been a couple of folks I think who've said that, but yeah, she's one.
Yeah. Tony has his hand up. Tony, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Thanks, James. Hi, Diana. Hi, James. Thanks, everyone. So I think I'm kind of building up on Jay's a little bit regarding to the risk and the context, where I think at least in my case, I seen at least two situations where the first situation where so basically the bottom line first is we try to flush out the risk as early as we can, because whenever we flush out the risk, there's so many things that surprise us and we don't want to do or we want to continue. So one case where one customer, they kind of want these features, but in order to actually doing that features, we have to actually spend at least a month just to do the kind of like background work. So we kind of say, oh, we can just use this little script to give us what we want, and then we can give them exactly what they want in a week or two. Then it turned out the customer say, no, one of the customers say, I want it, but the other customers say, no, I don't want it. So we have to change our direction completely. So that is my first case. The second case is with the performance. So when we deal with performance, we have to get the data first, because if we don't get the data, how do we know we fix the right problem, or it is we actually fix the performance problems? So so even though we are aware that we have to flush out the risk by gathering the data as much as possible, so we know that fix will fix that specific problem on that environment only when we are about mid or very close to the end. Then we realize, holy crap, there's a different environment. We didn't gather the data. And it turns out that that environment, we don't get as much performance as compared to previous environment. And I think the team, lucky enough, the team say, that's okay, we can continue. So I think those are my two experiences with that context and surprise.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Being surprised or blindsided by context is really common. It's always this sort of gut punch when it happens, right? It's like, oh, we should have known that, but we didn't.
Right. That's why the perspective analysis activity that's in we call it impact and probability, improv, that we use. I mean, you can do a lot of other things for that perspective analysis thing, but the improv activity that Ainsley and I talk about in the book is really kind of fun, because you have people just work in small groups or work alone or whatever, just to come up with the wildest things they could think of that could possibly impact the team, whether it impacted positively or impacted negatively. We got invited to the White House, or Mount St. Helens erupted again. I mean, it could be anything, right? And so you can, by encouraging those kind of wild speculations about things that might happen in the next 3 months, then we take all those items and look at, well, in what way would that impact us? Would it impact us positively, and would it be a huge benefit, or would it impact us negative, and would it be catastrophic, or is it somewhere kind of in the middle? And then how likely is it? And it's that second one where we start noticing, oh, well, that's going to happen without us even needing to think about it. And so we better have either a mitigation or an encouragement for that, because that's really going to happen. Mount St. Helens might go, and it might take down the electric grid, and it might send us, spiraling into the darkness, but it's kind of unlikely in the next 3 months. Otherwise we would have been hearing about it before, right? So we can take that concern kind of off the table for now. And so by working through that way, and by encouraging the fun of even the wild and crazy ideas about what might happen, we get a really good solid sense of here's probably the landscape for the next 3 months. And then the team can, as part of their retrospectives or part of their planning, can redo that activity every month or so, or every 6 weeks, and just kind of have it always be a rolling analysis about what do we see heading our direction, and how will we respond when those things happen. And it can be really useful that way.
I want to switch gears for a moment to something else Tony mentioned, which is something I see happen more often than I originally expected when I first started programming, which is that they started doing their context analysis and their purpose, and they learned one thing from one stakeholder or customer, and then heard from other customers, no, that's not what we wanted. And it reminds me of the time when I was working with the Ministry of Education in Canada, and one of the Canadian provinces. And they were building a new sort of curriculum management software for teachers. But it turned out there were a lot of disagreements on the parts of the teachers about what good curriculum management looked like. And prior to there being software, everybody could just sort of paper over those differences. But once you had software, that was going to define the one true way of doing this, right? So the team ended up being at the center of this storm, and having to be a mediator for their stakeholders. And I've seen this more often than I expect, because I think software does tend to make things concrete in a way that people aren't used to. So have you seen this, and Diana, and what do you do when that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I tend not to be working as much with the product folks, but when I do, I've seen that. That is I was working for a big distribution company, and they were putting together some software to help deliveries and those kinds of things happen in a good way, and the whole kind of supply chain, which is really in the news right now. And as it turned out, different different manufacturers, different people who were stakeholders, whether they were going to be customers or not, but they were hoping they might be customers in the future. So different stakeholders had different ideas about how this distribution, what features they needed in a distribution management system and what was most important to them, and what should come first, second, and third in terms of what the team was building. And I worked with that product owner and their product management system, and I never interacted with the stakeholders, but they did, and so then we would work out ways that they could talk to those stakeholders differently and work out some of this. And they ended up actually splitting into 3 separate products because they could create some kind of clusters of stakeholders that, well, these folks all seem to want kind of the same thing, and these folks all seem to want it. But they could repurpose part of the code they'd already written to serve each of those, and then do the peculiarities separately.
I think this comes back to that, how purpose is so important and so often underestimated in terms of really how much work there is to do to really understand where is the value of this product and what are we trying to accomplish. But let's move on to alignment before we run out of time. Really fantastic topic. The question I have for all of you and for you, Diana, is what techniques have you used to create alignment on your teams? And of course, Diana, you have several in the book. Do you have any? Of course, you could talk about the ones in the book, or do you have any others that are particularly favorite that didn't make the cut?
Well, yeah, there's a lot, particularly around, finding simple rules for the team so that people can take independent action. I think that's really important. And then the working agreements for when we're taking collective action and what we're going to do together, those are important. But I really like finding new activities that bring the team together and help them get a sense of themselves as a team right in the beginning. And I think the one that we have in the book was kind of the marketplace of skills, where people say, this is what I'd like to learn. This is what I think I could teach the other people on the team, both in the team and outside the team, away from work. And there's a really wonderful, and I don't think this is a story I used in the book. I was working with a team one time, and the one person said that one of the things that they could teach that they had a great strength in was away from work, was they were a master gardener. They'd been through all they become a master gardener to master gardeners kind of thing. And another person had put on their sheet, I just bought a house. It's got a small orchard. I really need to learn how to prune, right? Neither of them knew that about the other until we did that activity. And then they were able to even create a closer bond between those two teammates because one could begin to advise the other and on something that they really, really needed help with. And so by, sort of enlarging the context of the team, we're not just work focused. We've got these other things that we're whole people. The more we individuate and see each other as whole people with all of our strengths, the more we build the co-intelligence of the team. And the continuation of that story is that later on, I heard somebody who was also on that team told me that the analogies from pruning the trees in the orchard started creeping into their mob programming discussions where they felt they needed to prune the code a little bit as they refactored and redesigned. So the whole thing ended up helping everybody.
Right. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That idea of we're whole people and it's not just about the work. It's one I have trouble with because, I'm a programmer and I've got this very sort of concrete, let's get it done, get it done focus. I also think that in the in the virtual world of today, with everybody in little boxes on the screen, it's so much harder to create those connections. Do you have any suggestions for us about how to use alignment activities to help create those personal connections in a remote environment?
I just heard a great one. And I will credit this to Chris Lucian and the folks at Hunter Industries and their mobbing. They said they wanted to get together for a holiday gathering of some kind, but they're all an all remote team at this point. And so a few of them had a conversation about, what is it we miss about being in the office together? And, or what is missing from our virtual environment? Not necessarily that they miss these things, but somebody said, we only have a couple of senses here. And so one of the things that we miss is the sense of smell. Somebody makes coffee in the morning and we know we can go over to the coffee station and get a new cup of coffee. And then somebody says, yeah, or somebody makes popcorn and then we all want popcorn. And then somebody else says, oh my gosh, or maybe somebody burns the popcorn and then we're all stuck with that all day. So there's positives and negatives to this. But out of that conversation, they decided to send everyone on the team a set of scented markers. So they all had exactly the same set of scented markers. And then they had a get together, a virtual discussion about, when I refer to the grape scented marker, what code smell does that? What kind of a code smell is that about? Or, we'll all smell our grape scented marker when this kind of code smell comes up. And, I think, if we are open and clever about it, we can figure out ways of doing that. I mean, I've on teams where we regularly create our own hand signals for Zoom calls. So we have a more human solution to the human problems of feeling connected, as opposed to relying only on the technical solutions. So there are a number of things out there, I think, that we can do if we just try to think outside the box, right? Yeah. Outside of this box. Some people are relying for some kinds of meetings more on the spatial chats, where you can move closer or further away from people, or, the technology keeps rolling along, and I think we just have to keep in touch with what's out there that's new that can help us feel more connected.
Yeah, absolutely. The speaking of the spatial chat, this was coming up on the Discord a few weeks ago, and one of the ones I don't remember. There was 2 or 3 that were mentioned, but the one that stands out to me, I think, because it has a good name, is Gather.town. Which is an interesting one, and one I'm looking forward to trying. Actually, I've talked about this FAST team that I'm working with before, about 45, 50 people on the team, and we need to do an alignment session. And that's a lot of people, and to do that remotely, it's a tough challenge, and it's one that I've been sort of percolating on for a while now. And now, of course, you remind me, how am I going to get the human side? And Gita Klitgard has a great exercise about that she put in the book, about people making a statement about themselves and then physically moving your icon around or your avatar around to represent, I agree, or I have that, or I don't.
Yeah. The constellations. We can a lot of the activities that we would do in person, we can replicate through the tooling, and constellations is one of them.
I think the hard thing about the tooling that maybe tools like GatherTown would fix is that it's really hard to get those simultaneous knots of conversation that are very freeform. Tools have breakout sessions, but often they're controlled by a moderator, and that's just not the same thing.
No.
Regarding the multiple senses, there was a comment in the chat that I have to share, although I may regret it, and you all may regret hearing it if you're watching this on the YouTube video. But Jay Bazuzzi says about the senses, I expected to hear, we each wear a t-shirt all day and then mail them to each other, which probably isn't appropriate, but that would be one way to get more senses.
Well, but that sort of thing, like a not chain letters, but that sort of progressive thing where somebody creates something and mails it to somebody else and mails it. I mean, I think when we're not in the office together, we need to start supporting some of those things that we can do external to the office that helps us feel connected.
Yeah.
There's various kinds of activities and things. So that the mailing physical things to each other part of that, I think, is has real possibilities. I don't know that I want your T-shirt, Jay.
No, I'm not going to mail you a T-shirt. But yeah, there's something exciting about getting something real in the mail, especially if it's handwritten or hand created, handcrafted in some way, because that feels special, and it does, I think, help create that connection. That it's and I think engineers in particular tend to be more focused on, let's just get it done. I know, like I said, I have that problem, and discount the human side. But anything that you can do to create more of that connection, I think, has a lot of value.
Well, and I was reminded yesterday of a saying by a colleague in the open space world, his name, and in the facilitation world, his name is Chris Corrigan. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, everything you do for the team is one less thing they can learn to do for themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think the more we take the opportunity to ask the team, and this is an alignment, I mean, this is definitely an alignment exercise. What do you want to do with your end of the year team connection budget? What do you want to do with your, how are we going to make that decision about how to feel, what would make us feel more connected to each other, and sort of bring that back rather than trying to do it for them, but help them create their own alignments within the team, I think is really important.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite sayings. Everything you do for the team is one thing they don't do for themselves, or whatever the original was. Because it's so true. And I think coaches in particular tend to think of their job as, I am telling the team what to do, or I'm showing the team how to do it. But I think the really experienced coaches know that it's really about creating that capability in the team, and you're making yourself unnecessary. Diana, this has been a fantastic session. And this is our last session of the year. Diana, thank you so much for helping us go out with a bang for our final book club.
Happy holidays for everybody.
Yeah, happy holidays,
no matter what
everyone.
holiday I'm particularly attached to solstice because I can't wait for the sun to start turning around. but whatever holiday you celebrate, this is the time of year to do it up with a bang.
Yeah. So happy holidays, everybody. We will be back on January 7th. We're going to be looking at energized work, which should be an interesting topic. In the meantime, have a great holiday. The announcement for the new session will go up on Discord and on Twitter and on my website sometime before the 7th. But for the rest of the year, I'm taking the rest of the year off. So I plan on enjoying my holidays. Diana, once again, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us. That is it for us today. And I hope you have a great rest of December. Bye, everyone.